Hello and welcome to the Bright Talk Summit on Recruiting and Talent Management. There was a whole lot of really good content. I've been listening to a little bit of it myself this morning. If you haven't already heard it, be sure and go back for the on-demand presentation by Jennifer Leak of Assessment Pros. That one is called Tapping into the People Data Within Your Company. Later today, I'm pretty excited about a panel discussion about future-proofing your succession planning. And also there's one about finding top talent in the crowd. That's by Lori Kleiman. So there's all kinds of good stuff here for you. I'm Deb Calvert. I'm the president of People First Productivity Solutions. And today I have been asked to present on a topic that is not unfamiliar to any of us, but I think perhaps underappreciated or understood about how important it really is. So I'm intending to spotlight employee engagement because foundationally, employee engagement really is critically important to the retention of top talent, but also to your business results. So I'm just going to lay it all out there in a way that even the folks in the C-suite can understand. So perhaps you can take some of these data points to them to help you get your initiatives rolling. Okay, well, if you are new to Bright Talk, just a couple things I want to point out to you. First of all, there's a tab that you'll see for Get Live Support. If you have any issues during the presentation, better to go directly there. If you post it to me as a question, unfortunately, there's just not a lot I can do during the midst of the presentation, but the folks at Bright Talk are awesome. If you push that orange button, they'll help you right away. There's also another tab called Attachments and Links, and I've loaded that up for you with some bonus content, and I encourage you to take anything and everything there that looks relevant. I'll reference a few of those items as we proceed through the presentation. I will really be looking forward to your questions. For those of you who are listening live, please don't hold back. If you've got questions, probably somebody else who's listening live or who comes on later on demand will have that same question. So go ahead and post it for me. I'll take them as they come. And at the end of the presentation, please don't forget to leave a review for me. That's the only way that I'll know what you liked and what you think I could do better next time. So thank you in advance for that. Okay, well, let's begin with why this matters. Why does employee engagement matter? And I'm going to roll it all the way back to the problem that probably presents itself first, and that's retention, people leaving. And I feel your pain. I do a lot of executive coaching, and my executive clients, as well as HR teams that I interact with, they all agree that the revolving door is a big problem for businesses. They're seeing significantly increased expenses as they're having to deal with people leaving and filling that void, and then spending all that money on recruiting and selection and onboarding and ramping people up. And ultimately, there's also a cost in terms of their effectiveness, and as an organization, a really important loss long-term when it comes to succession management. So really, if you have serious retention woes, the business is actually at risk. Short-term, perhaps that impact is manageable. Long-term, as you know, it only gets worse and worse in a myriad of ways. Now, let me point your attention to the last bullet point here, because this is a big myth out there. It's a myth that people leave because you're not paying them enough. If that were true, you'd just throw more money at them and save money on all those other expenses because they're leaving. But it's not the main issue. Pay is not the main reason that people leave. Now, people may say that they're leaving because they found a better paying job, but there's more to the story. We've got to step back to why were they looking for a different job, or why were they open to a different offer in the first place? And then you have to look ahead to that next job that they're taking. Are they really going to be happier in that other job where they're making more money? Research tells us that that is not the case, that that's completely a myth, that there's very little overlap between pay and job satisfaction. Now, those of you who follow me, you know that I do a lot of work with sales teams. So I hear this, yeah, but, quite often. And it's, yeah, but these are salespeople, so of course they're money motivated. And here again, we're dealing with a myth. Or at a minimum, we're dealing with some very stale information. It just isn't true. Research doesn't bear this up. The salespeople I talk to in field when they're coming and going from jobs, they don't say that what caused their initial dissatisfaction was the amount of pay that they made. And even if it used to be true, way back in the days when I was selling, even if it used to be true, it's no longer true. More recent studies by the Objective Management Group and Salesforce and others all point to the same situation where sellers are leaving primarily because of poor relationships with their managers. Now, besides all of that, what if you did decide to attract talent by paying more money? What if you did that? Well, then what? How are you going to keep those people as soon as somebody else dangles another carrot? How are you going to keep those people year after year after year when you're looking to give them their merit increases or their standard cost of living increases? Can you really sustain that higher pay rate? And if people aren't happy, will they stay just because of that pay rate? Research tells us no. Your own experience probably says the same thing. So we're just going to put all of that away. We're going to put all of that nonsense about pay away and talk about the alternatives. How can you, if it's not pay, how can you do a better job of retaining your top talent? What we know from research is that it's more likely that people are going to stay when they have a sense of belonging, when they're feeling that they can make a more meaningful contribution, when they have an emotional connection, when the workplace culture causes them to feel valued and ennobled in the work that they do. And ennobled, by the way, that means feeling worthy or important. And all of these touchy-feely aspects that I'm describing, every single one of them is more effective as a retention measure than pay alone. You've probably seen this research from Gallup. It's been repeated for decades. It hasn't ever changed. These are the top 4 reasons that people leave. Now remember, Gallup, when they do this research, they don't ask people during the exit interview what caused you to leave, because in the exit interview, people already have another job, so they're telling you, oh, I found a job that pays better. But Gallup goes to people who recently took a new job, and they ask them, what was it in the first place that caused you to go looking for another job that ended up paying you more money? And these are the top 4 reasons, pay being number 5 behind all 4 of these. People say they leave because they don't know what it takes to be successful. They don't know what their manager wants. They don't know how to go about delivering what their manager wants. The number 2 reason, they say that the manager is not giving them consistent and clear expectations, followed by that the manager hasn't shown me how I could earn more in the future or how I could develop my career in the future. And that goes hand in hand with the 4th reason. My manager's not giving me regular feedback. I'm not getting any coaching, so I don't feel like I know how to improve my work performance. These are the reasons that people leave. We also know, and this is somewhat generational, but I won't stretch so far as to say that this is only the millennials, because I work with a lot of folks in the non-millennial age groups who will say the very same thing. What people are saying is that doing something meaningful is what motivates them at work. And that's sort of hard to articulate. So if you can imagine participating in a study like this, you might be more likely to say the more common things like recognition or I want to get that raise, meaning that the top reason, being able to do something meaningful and being motivated by the ability to contribute something meaningful, that might be a little underrepresented here. Nevertheless, it's the top reason. So we've got to talk about that. We've got to talk about motivating people in a way that causes them to see meaning or purpose in the work that they do. What I'm showing you now, this is just about the 4 different ways that people are motivated. And it's a simple box model, so let me walk you through it. There are 2 variables that give us 4 combinations. I'm starting at the upper left-hand side, and we have at the top the light green shaded boxes. Those are positive ways of being motivated. We have intrinsic and we have extrinsic. Intrinsic is anything from inside of you. Anything that is from your own memories, your own experiences, your own beliefs would be intrinsic. Anything extrinsic is coming from outside of you. It's imposed or offered by an external source. Don't worry, you're not having audio issues. I'm taking a little break here and there to cough, so I don't have to do that out loud. And I apologize for that. So the 4 pieces together, in that upper left-hand box, we have a motivation that is extrinsic, something that someone else puts out there for you, but it's positive. That would be something like getting a raise, making more money. There's also negative extrinsic, lower left-hand corner. That comes from someone else, but it has a consequence, a negative consequence associated with it. Those 2 types of motivation, the ones that come from external, those 2 are not as powerful as the intrinsic motivators that you see on the right-hand side. Being able to be intrinsically motivated by something that you're excited about, something that has personal meaning to you, something that lights a spark for you. Those are more powerful forms of motivation. Now, in the workplace, of course, it's much easier, and it might feel like it's more fair and equitable to offer the same thing to everyone. But the same thing to everyone that you offer is inherently extrinsic. Inherently, that's coming from outside the individual. And as long as it comes from outside of them, it has less weight, less power to actually motivate them. What that means is that if we want to be as motivating as possible, we have to create those cultures and those environments where people are going to access their own intrinsic motivation. We attract certain kinds of people who are intrinsically motivated. We have a workplace culture where they can be fueled by those things that intrinsically motivate them. And then we allow for that within our groups of individuals or teams. So an intrinsic motivation, maybe I'll say this a different way, it's where somebody already has a spark within them. And when the culture or the manager can ignite that spark within someone, that burns a whole lot brighter and it lasts a whole lot longer than lighting a fire underneath someone with any form, positive or negative, of extrinsic motivation. So our job then, if you're in HR, if you're a business owner, if you're a manager, our job is to know the people who work with us well enough to understand what their sparks are and to ignite those sparks and to fan those flames so they burn brightly. I'm going to give you just a little bit more about intrinsic motivation. I think that the E's describe it very nicely. If we can enable people to find their passion and work on their passion, if we can make them feel worthy and important in the work that they're doing, if we can encourage them, you know, the word encourage, it means to put courage into. So if we can give them the courage to try new things, to push themselves, to be excited about the work they do, to stretch and challenge themselves, all of that has an intrinsic motivation to it. You probably know the research from Dr. Csikszentmihalyi at the University of Chicago. He's the guy who talks about being in the zone or in the flow. The time when any of us are in the zone performing at our peak is when the level of challenge is just a little bit of a stretch beyond our current capabilities. So that's where people also need encouragement so that they'll stick with it and they'll push themselves and they'll reach a little further and a little higher than they otherwise would. Enablement and ennoblement also come from having some voice and some choice in how they do their work. It's easy to give people the step-by-step process and to tell them exactly what they need to do every minute of every day. And certainly some jobs demand that, but most don't. Most jobs have an outcome. And if we can give people the outcome and the tools they need to achieve that outcome, and then give them a little range in how they choose to do that work, most people are going to find the best way for them. And they might exceed what we would ever have imposed on them. So if we can give them a little bit of control as soon as they've earned the trust and the ability and the skills needed to do the work, the more we ought to do that. And then that last E, it's a big one. I'm going to spend more time talking about that. And that's engagement. All these pieces fit together. Ultimately, they create a sense of intrinsic motivation, a sense of purpose in the work, and employees who are more engaged. They're happier, they feel trusted, they feel a sense of belonging, and they collaborate and contribute at higher levels. But there's one more E that makes this all wrap around together. And that E is emotion. Check out this little finding from the Corporate Executive Board. I've been talking so far about lots of emotional kinds of things, all those reasons that people leave jobs that are higher on the list than pay. They all have something to do with that emotional connection, that commitment that they put into the work they do. And that emotional commitment is 4 times more valuable than any rational commitment. Rational commitments are all extrinsically motivated. You can get a promotion, you can get a raise, you can keep your job, you can get off probation. All of those are extrinsic and rational types of commitments, reasons that would drive behaviors. And as long as they're out there in the realm of extrinsic, they're not as valuable as the intrinsic, the emotional commitment that would cause people, when they have it, to apply additional discretionary effort to their work. And the conclusion here, it's a pretty powerful one. The search for a high-performing workforce is synonymous with the search for emotional commitment. So that's the reason why we want to be able to create that emotional commitment for the people who work with us. Here's another way of looking at it. This one comes from the CLC, and that is coming right back to the management team. The emotional commitment is driven by the behaviors, the activities, and the attributes of the manager. The person that I report to, my manager, that's the one who I really need to see certain activities and attributes from if I am to be emotionally committed to the job, the organization, the team, and that manager. And if the manager is demonstrating the kinds of behaviors, the attitudes, activities, attributes that are correlated to a positive emotional commitment, then there's pretty big numbers in terms of those increases that you can see. Now, what are those manager activities and attributes? Well, they probably won't surprise you. Some of them are as simple as acknowledging people. Hello, good morning. How's that project coming along? Hey, I really like what you were able to put together in this report. Basic acknowledgments are an important part of what managers do. Surly, unpredictable, angry all the time, heads down managers have employees who are not emotionally committed to the same extent as those who are. I've given you a tool. In the attachments and links, there is a tool that you can download. It is a checklist that managers can use. Really simple, fast, easy things that anyone's capable of doing, and a manager can customize this for himself or herself, and then it gives them prompts, daily reminders of the simple things they can do to increase the levels of emotional commitment and engagement from their employees. So be sure and take a look for that one. And you can share it. You're welcome to use it, but share it with all your managers. But that's fine. It's free. We don't mind that at all. By the way, something else I ought to mention here, for those of you who are enjoying the facts and figures and you really do want to put the business case together for the C-suite or others that you work with, I went ahead and gave you an attachment with lots more statistics. And if you even want more of the same, I've got reams of this stuff, so just be in touch with me. Okay, now I'm throwing this term around pretty loosely, so let me pull the threads together and give you the formal definition. What do I mean when I say employee engagement? I rather like this definition. It's a compilation of a couple. But employee engagement, it's got two pieces to it. It's the heightened emotional connection. There's no way around it. It is emotional. That trumps rational. We need the emotional connection. It's the heightened emotional connection that an employee feels for his or her organization. And with that emotional connection, that's what causes him or her to choose to apply additional discretionary effort to the work they do. You know, something we forget is that they always have a choice about how much additional discretionary effort they're going to apply. Maybe they're just doing enough to get by. Every day, though, we have to remember that's a choice. And we want to create the environments and cultures where they're making a choice, they're feeling good about the work that they do, and they're more likely to apply that additional discretionary effort. Something else that I think sometimes gets forgotten, and that is that employee engagement isn't what we're after. Right? Having a higher score on your employee engagement survey, that's not the point. The point is that employee engagement yields tremendous benefits. It is the key that unlocks the door. So you've got to help people understand it's not just about the score, it's not just about getting the key, it's about having that key so that you can unlock all the other benefits. I'm going to show you some of those benefits now. Doesn't matter. No matter what kind of organization you are, no matter what type of company you are, no matter what outputs, products, work that you do, any strategies that you have, if you've got your strat plan put together, no matter what's on that list, engagement is the primary enabler to successfully execute on any business strategy. Any. And here's why. There's this really interesting domino effect that happens when you have employee engagement. Employee engagement, remember I'm defining that as the two pieces. It's the heightened emotional connection, and with that heightened emotional connection, it's the additional discretionary effort that an employee chooses to apply. So the first thing you get when you have stronger levels of engagement, the first thing you get is higher levels of retention for your high potential employees. You keep the people that you want to keep when they have an emotional connection to the workplace and to their manager and to the work they do because of the meaning, because of the spark that's been lit, because of the intrinsic motivation that causes them to get up and go to work and apply that additional discretionary effort. Part two, with people sticking around longer and applying additional discretionary effort, the next logical thing that happens is that you get increased levels of productivity. And this is measured in many different ways, all of them being positively correlated to increased employee engagement. You're going to get fewer workers' comp claims. You're going to get fewer absences. You are going to have higher quality as well as higher quantity output. You'll have less overtime. People are going to do more work in less time. That's productivity. And that comes from the additional discretionary effort. And when your people stick around longer and they produce more and they do better, well, naturally, the next thing you get is an improvement in your level of customer satisfaction and loyalty. Your customers will keep coming back. They'll tell their friends. They'll give you referrals. They'll be more satisfied. Satisfied customers plus increased productivity plus employees who stick around longer yield two things. They yield higher levels of top-line revenue. All those customers who stick around, they're spending more money with you. That's top-line revenue. And then you have fewer expenses related to turnover and onboarding and training and those gaps when jobs go unfilled. You have less of all those expenses. So with less expenses and higher top-line revenue, of course, you also get an improvement in your profit margin. Now, that's a true domino effect. I'll show you some additional stats here in just a minute so you can see what I'm referring to. Every bit of this is lined up to employee engagement. That's the first and foremost thing. But it does beg the question, if I can get all of that from employee engagement, then how do I get employee engagement? And we've sort of answered this question already. It has to do with your leaders, with your managers, with the people who are influencing others in your organization. Remember, it's the manager who has the ability to unlock that emotional commitment to not only the manager, but to the organization and the team and the job. That means that your managers need to know and be expected to choose the right attitudes, attributes, and behaviors that will unlock employee engagement. So you get this beautiful domino effect. Leadership development is critically important. It's not a nice to have. It's a must have if you want employee engagement and increased retention and everything else that comes along with it. A couple of facts and figures here, and go ahead and start posting your questions. I want to make sure to leave time for any I haven't answered yet. Engagement really is the key. So when you have these employees who are more committed, they're trying harder, they're performing better, and look at that one, they're 87% less likely to leave than those employees with low levels of commitment. A little bit more about retention. When you have lower engagement, employees leave. When you have higher engagement, employees stay. Multiple studies have been done about this. When you take a look even within the same business, when you take a look at business units even within the same company, you can find that employee turnover is significantly correlated to levels of employee engagement. Now, I told you that I'd show you some stats on the rest of it, too. I know you came for a presentation about retention, but retention has so much impact that we've got to tell the full story. This goes a ways back. Peter Drucker drew this conclusion decades ago. In case you're wondering how to quantify or put some ROI around that increased productivity, his formula still seems to work. If you are in a company where your labor costs amount to about half of your total earnings, which is pretty typical, then you have the opportunity by increasing your productivity to double your organization's profits. That's the potential impact. And that comes from more engaged employees. Think about this. If you had managers who could bring about 3 times more talent, energy, and commitment from their employees, what would that yield in terms of productivity? The numbers can be pretty staggering, but just think about that for your own organization. Customer satisfaction, again, pretty big numbers. When you have higher levels of engagement, you can get significantly higher customer satisfaction and loyalty. And the profit and revenue impact is profound too. When you have employee engagement scores, you can get double-digit growth in an organization. Again, within the same organization, you can see that the top and the bottom quartiles have significantly different numbers in terms of profit because of the level of engagement they have with their employees. So across the board, this is beneficial in so many ways. Now, let me just give you a summary of the benefits here. This is everything I've just talked about. These are not insignificant. There is a tremendous amount of data out here about this, and I think sometimes in HR we don't do a very good job of telling this story. When we ask for the human capital resources that we need, we forget to tie it to the other parts of the business and to why this really matters. So this is the part of the story that you'll want to talk about. Okay, now I've got a question here. I'm going to go ahead and take it here before I do some wrap up. The question is, tell us how to encourage employee engagement for tenured employees who are complacent and do not express an interest to develop or move up in their role. Well, back to the Csikszentmihalyi research with the drone zone, that's what you're referring to here. That's when we have people who are not challenged by their work. Their level of challenge is less than their level of experience or ability. So instead of being in the flow zone, they're in the drone zone. They're a little bored with their work. And they might not ever admit that because hey, they've got a pretty good thing going there because they're tenured. But what is it that you can do if they don't want to develop or move up in their role? You've got to rely on the intrinsic motivators. Those are extrinsic. To develop or to move up in their role, those are extrinsic. We have to know what they want. Are they looking to buy a new car? Are they looking to have stability and security because that's very important to them? What is it that they get passion and joy? What work do they like doing the very best? What is it that they have an interest in? And of course, this answer is going to be different for every person in this situation. But these employees too have something that if you could ignite that spark, if you get them motivated intrinsically, they would become more engaged. They would apply additional discretionary effort. It might be the emotional commitment because of finding new meaning in their work, or having an opportunity to have a greater sense of belonging or meaning and purpose in their work. I wish it was an easier answer, but we'll just have to go out and find it for that individual. Okay, so let's talk about your role, then I'll take a couple more questions. Your role, if you're in HR and you're managing managers or influencing them, or your role if you are a manager, it is that you need to be able to get that emotional commitment. You need to trigger it. You need to fan the flames of whatever internal spark there might be. Your effectiveness is, yes, about developing people. It's about including people. It's about recognizing their success and encouraging them. But don't do it just to check it off the list in a generic way. Be sure that you're doing it with the intention of building emotional commitment, that you're creating the experiences for people that are personally relevant and meaningful for each one of them. And then HR gets to increase the level of retention, not because HR did something, but because they equipped managers. They gave managers the right tools, the training. They helped them to understand what it took as managers to emotionally engage people. Tools like that simple checklist I mentioned to boost engagement levels, or tools like the training I've included here, which is about how to both manage the work and lead the people, because it's the leadership skills, those are the ones, those behaviors are the ones that drive employee engagement. Okay, some other really great questions here. Let me come back to those. Being in a position of influence and not in an official management position, what steps can we take to help initiate, foster, and advance employee engagement? And I have to tell you, I love this question. I absolutely love this question. It's true for so many folks in HR too. You don't have direct authority. But it can be as easy as getting to know someone. It can be as easy as spotting what somebody likes to do and giving them the opportunities to contribute more meaningfully in that work that they're passionate about. It can be about reminding people of the greater purpose, the vision, the mission, the values of your organization, and how their work, even if they do nothing but produce widgets, how their work helps to accomplish something else in the world. So that's the aim for anyone, whether you're managing or influencing. It's just to change the nature of the conversation, to elevate the work beyond the punch the card, do the job, leave at the end of the day mentality. Okay, here's another one. How does a manager who has employees in multiple locations improve interactions amongst employees that work at those remote locations and are not in the primary location where the manager and most of the staff members are? Okay, so I'm going to answer this briefly, but I'm also going to make a book recommendation. It's a new book, probably came out, maybe 6 or 7 months ago. And I apologize because I do not remember the name of the book, but the author's name is Kevin Eikenberry, Eikenberry, and it's about leading from remote locations. And it's fantastic. It has lots and lots of tips and tools and things that you can do when you have employees spread out across different locations. But the answer I want to give you, the short version, is that work isn't necessarily different for a manager than one who works face-to-face day in and day out with employees. It comes back to the same thing, whether it be in one-on-ones or in casual interactions that you have that are less formal. It's about knowing the employee, knowing what gets them fired up, knowing how that links to the work that they do, and helping them to see it for themselves. It's about that internal spark. I think maybe it would be helpful here if I gave you an example. I feel like I'm talking in some vague terms. So I'm going to give you a real story. I was coaching an executive who had a team that was pretty downtrodden. They'd come through some very difficult years, a lot of turnover on the team, and some serious downsizing in the organization. And over those years, he had begun to isolate himself. He had gotten less involved in the organization. He didn't walk the floor. He didn't know the people very well. And frankly, he was far too removed from the day-to-day work. So in addition to providing training to his managers about how to be leaders and how to engage employees, it was really important for him to set the example. And he was a little concerned at first about doing that, even though he was excited and he wanted to do it. He was a little bit concerned that it would seem like he was checking up on people or stepping on their toes or looking over their shoulders. And we got to a point, though, where he just decided he was going to spend about an hour a day, not all at once, but throughout the day he was going to make sure it was an hour roaming around the building, talking to people, checking in with people, being visible to people. Now, I know that's a pretty significant commitment, an hour a day, but that's what he decided. And it was almost like a light switch went on because he happened to have a very charismatic personality. And his megawatt smile was pretty contagious to people. And they certainly did feel worthy and important in the work that they did. And this same CEO, he had founded this company. He was diehard, true believer in the vision and the mission of the company and the importance of the work that they were doing. So that's what he talked about all the time. When he saw somebody doing a good job, he linked it to the bigger meaning and purpose of that work. And he helped people in all different kinds of job functions to see the relevance of what they were doing. And of course, he was now also modeling this to other directors and managers in the organization, and they figured out that they could be doing this too. So that became more and more powerful. It kept multiplying, and people felt better about the work. They didn't change a lot more than that, not initially. And even with that, morale started to improve. People started to enjoy their work more. They started feeling like they were something bigger and more important than the job title itself. The reviews on Glassdoor improved within 3 months, even as people continued to leave, but not as much as they had been. And 18 months later, things are rocking at that organization. It had to start somewhere. So I hope that helps as a story. I've got another question posted and time probably for a couple more. I don't know the answer to this question, which is what is the employee turnover rate in performing companies? I don't know the exact answer to that. I suspect that it's going to vary by sector. And you've got me curious, though, so I'm going to go out and see what kind of research I can do. If anybody else knows that, listening live, go ahead and post that answer for us. But I do for certain know that employee turnover rates in top performing companies are lower than they are in companies that are not performing as well. I've worked in some pretty tough industries. For example, I do a lot of work in media where there's a great deal of turnover, not just because of the cutbacks, for example, in newspapers, but also because it's become a difficult job to do. And on the sales teams, for example, they can sometimes have 80% turnover rates year after year after year. But of the organizations, newspapers I'm talking about, that have people who turn over less, revenue performance is significantly stronger, as is profitability. So there's no doubt about that. I apologize, I don't have an exact number for you, but be in touch with me offline and we'll see what we can go out and find. Okay, well, I think that gets us just about to our wrap-up point here. I hope that this has been helpful. Employee engagement really is the secret ingredient to retaining top talent. It starts with a mindset of putting people first, and that's what we do here at People First Productivity Solutions. We coach executives, we consult with HR teams, and we provide management training so that people know both how to manage the work and lead people. That's what it takes to retain your talent and to unleash that beautiful domino effect that comes from increased employee engagement. Post a review for me, take attachments and links, and thank you very much for being here.